Okay, so to start with, we're going to recite, chant together 7 times the mantra of the Prajnaparamita, the mantra of the Heart Sutra, Tayata Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhisoha. And after the 7th recitation, we make a long exhale, so and then we spend a few minutes resting in the nature of the mind, just in the space-like nature of the mind. So this is to clean the mind of our activities, you see, and to bring our mind here now to this event, and so that we can absorb ourselves and benefit, so that our mind gets benefit from this instruction that we're going to hear, and try to experience them instead of just hearing intellectual information. So the mantra means, Tayata means it is like this, and then it means gone, gone, gone beyond, gone completely beyond to perfect awakening. So one tries, you see, to go beyond the concern of this life, go beyond the concern of cyclic existence, go beyond self-centeredness, and go beyond to complete enlightenment. So we try to have this aspiration in our heart to go completely beyond all what hinders us, all that keeps us stuck, in seeing things as concrete, solid, and all the mental affliction and problems that comes from this state of mind.
Bodhi
Tayada Gade Gade Paragate Parazamgate Bodhiso Tayada Gade Gade Paragate. Deep breath. Bodhiso. So one tries to let one's mind rest in space. So instead of focusing on the thoughts, the mental image or the emotion, one focus on the space in which all these events happen, and one tries to relax into that space. So one let go one's attachment to thoughts, attachment to the self. One becomes space of awareness. All right. So welcome everybody. Many friendly faces. So last time I was here was a year ago? Something like that. So a year has passed in our lives. So event happened, right? Whether we want it or not. It's the nature of time passing. Something always happens. See? So it's like Milarepa said, everything can become a teaching. Whatever happens to our life, everything can be transformed into the path to enlightenment, right? So this text that we're going to study this weekend, meditate on, basically it shows how, we can transform our daily activity into the path of enlightenment, and especially what the heart of the path is. Actually, there's so many teachings, so many approach, but actually there's only two things, so it's love and compassion, and how things ultimately exist, so there's only two practices that one needs to do and become expert in, and use everyday activities to familiarize ourselves with these two states of mind, which are the two enlightenment mind, right? The two bodhicittas. So it's only that practice. All the others are there to help us to practice these two things. So it's actually the Dharma is very simple, if you really think about it, if you go to the essence. So this mind training, I think, was taught by the Buddha, and you have some extract or some essence taken in the in Nagarjuna's precious garland. Yeah, it's called precious garland. So there's this verse, whatever suffering is in the world, may I experience it, and whatever goodness I have, may others experience it. And then this teaching were further explained by Shantideva, and then it went to Dharmarakshita, which also called Serlingpa, and then Atisha went to study with that Lama for 12 years, and then he brought this teaching to Tibet. And then, so at the beginning it was just oral instruction that he passed on to a few disciples, and then his disciple Dromtonpa passed it to Potawa, and then to Sherawa, and then Geshe Chekawa actually put them into writings. So he thought that they were very beneficial for his mind, and then he started spreading it further. And then many people, at that time there was an epidemic of leprosy in that part of Tibet, and many people got cured of leprosy by doing this practice of giving and taking, put on the bread. So at some point it was called the Lepers Meditation, because many lepers would do that and they got cured because of this practice. So Geshe Chekawa wrote it down, this instruction, and there's quite a few lineage of this teaching, so there's a northern tradition and there's the southern tradition, and so the Gelupa tend to follow the northern lineage of the text, that's the one that Lama Tsongkhapa received and commented on. And the southern lineage is more the text followed by the Kagyu Sakya and Nyingma. And in the Gelupa after Lama Tsongkhapa, Nyulshu Dharmabhadra wrote a commentary, and then that's the one that we know or have been familiarized with by the teaching of Pabonka Rinpoche, in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. So he comments on some of those verses. And then there's an extensive commentary in Light Rays of the Sun, which is a commentary on that. I received that from Geshe Tekchok at Nalanda. That, and then Geshe, His Holiness Dalai Lama and Kirti Senchab Rinpoche also, they teach this text. So you have different explanation, or for example, for Ultimate Truth, it's different in different texts, because this was written at the time of the 11th century, right? So the explanation was more Yogacara or Madhyamika, Svatantrika understanding of ultimate reality. So if you read some verses, it's a very different explanation of emptiness. Whereas in the Gelupa, then it is Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation of the Prasangika view. So you will see here. So let's say if you compare the present text that we are going to study with other texts, you will see there's some discrepancies here and there, right? And also certain point have 22 points or 18. So there's different version of this root text, and so someone mentioned that to His Holiness Dalai Lama, and he said, "Yeah, it doesn't matter. They all they all teach the same thing. how to become enlightened in this life. How to practice the path. And so the essence of the instruction is the same. Whether the point is exactly the same or not, it doesn't matter. So." So perhaps to start, we're going to read the text together, so we get an overview of it, so we see what what we try. Does everybody have a text? Yeah? No, not yet. So what is in bold? Actually, not. Someone changed it a bit. Yeah. So what is in bold is the root text, and then what is in italic or in not bold, that's my own addition based on the commentaries. So while you distribute the text, you see it has different points. So it's called the 7-point training of the mind. So the first point usually is the context in which the text is practiced, or sometimes it's called the preliminaries. Here it's called the groundwork. And then you have the second point, which is actually the main practice. You could only do point 1 and point 2 and go home. You don't miss anything because that's the main thing, right? And then point 2 is how to use adversity as support to realization. How to use everyday problem. And then the fourth point is the summary of the practice in life and death. How to practice, how to condense this practice, how to live it in this life and at the time of death. And then the point 5 is very useful, the measure of success in mind training. So you can see how far you have gone along the path, so you can check, you can see whether you passed the exam or not, So this is your exam, point 5. And then point 6 is the mind training commitment. So usually those which are serious about this practice, you have the a vow of individual liberation, the Bodhisattva Vajrayana vows. And so those which take this practice seriously, they add this commitment, this 16 point, of mind training commitment. So this is actually, if you're able to practice that properly, then you actually, it's very easy to make progress if you read this every day. So here there's 16 point, but sometimes you count them as 18. If you put the point 1 can be counted as 3 if you subdivide the 3. So sometimes it's called the 18 point mind training commitment. And those which do the Lama Chopa, so it mentions there, to keep this commitment. And then point 7 is further advice, the points that are interesting to look at, but a little bit less important. Also, many points, you seem like there's always is kind of repetition of the same thing again and again from a little bit different perspective. Okay, so to see what we're going to study, so we're going to read it together. Homage to great compassion. This instruction, handed down by Serlingpa, help us transform the problems of this degenerate time into factors supporting our progress to enlightenment. In this way, they are similar to a diamond, the sun, and medicinal tree. First, do the groundwork. Remember how precious this human life is for spiritual development, how everything is transient and the death can come at any time, how cause and effect are infallible, how existence conditioned by karma and mental afflictions is suffering. Awareness of how things ultimately exist. See all phenomena as dreamlike, they are not independent of mind and mental designation. Examine the ultimate nature of mind. Understand that this ultimate nature is also empty of inherent existence. Allow the mind to abide in the experience of space-like emptiness. In post-meditation, see everything, including yourself, as illusion-like. Knowing how things conventionally exist, train in great compassion. Begin by placing all blame in one thing, self-centeredness. Then meditate on the kindness of all beings. Alternate taking and giving. For taking, begin with yourself. These two, taking and giving, ride on your breath. On the basis of 3 objects, the 3 poisons arise. Transform them into 3 sources of virtue. 3 objects, pleasure, pain, and neutral sensation. 3 poisons, attachment, aversion, and indifference. 3 sources of virtue, use the own 3 poisons to free yourself from them. In daily life, use reminders. For example, may all suffering ripen upon me. May all my virtues ripen upon them. When misfortune fills the world and its inhabitants, transform them into the path of awakening. See all misfortune as purifying past negative action. Use them to train in renunciation, compassion, and emptiness. Immediately apply this mind training to whatever happens in your life. For activity, accumulating merit, purifying obscuration, make offerings to Spirit and to Dharma protectors. In brief, the essence of mind training is to apply yourself to the 5 strengths: strong determination, motivation, familiarization with the 2 bodhicitta, positive seed cultivating wholesome action, abandonment of self-grasping and self-centeredness, aspiration, prayer, dedication. The Mayana instruction of how to die are those 5 strengths and the bodily posture. Strong determination, may able to be died when for the 2 bodhicitta. Familiarization, meditate on the 2 bodhicitta till the last breath. Positive seed, to all who have been kind to you, as well as to your teacher, the 3 jewels and the poor. Abandonment, purifying of the non-virtuous deed. Aspiration, prayer, may I never be separated from the 2 bodhicitta in all my future lives. May I be born in a pure land and as human. You are successful if all of your spiritual practice have one aim, to gradually reduce and eliminate self-grasping and self-centeredness. Of the two witnesses, you rely on the main one, rely on yourself instead of others. You are able to maintain a continent mind, unaffected by the 8 worldly concerns. You have overcome some selfedness. You possess the 5 sins of greatness. Use each moment to enhance bodhicitta, pure morality through continuous awareness of karma, ability to bear hardship in combating delusion, body, speech and mind never separated from bodhicitta, well trained in a 6th perfection. You are able to practice even when distracted. Always abide by the 3 principles. Your mind transient should not contradict your vows, nor become a cause of arrogance, and should be impartial. Change your attitude, but act naturally. Don't speak about the shortcomings of others. Don't think about them. Give up all rewards. Abandon positive actions with an pure motivation. Don't be loyal to your delusions. Do not disparage others. Do not Do not take advantage of the requests of others. Do not pass on your responsibility or blame of your fault on someone weaker than you. Do not engage in mind training and ritual for selfish purpose. Do not seek to the peace, hoping for praise. Do not build spiritual development to make you feel superior. Do not take advantage of the others. Maintain awareness of either relative or ultimate bodhicitta in all your actions. In all adversity, giving and taking. Remember the 2 activities, one at the beginning and one at the end. Be patient, whatever happens, good and bad. In all situations, uphold your precept, including the mind training ones. Train in the 3 activities that are difficult. Recognize the presence of mental affliction. Apply their antidote and prevent the recurrence. Acquire the 3 essential factors for spiritual development: a qualified teacher, a mind intent on practice, and a superior marital condition. Let these 3 degenerate: devotion to the teacher, enthusiasm for mind training, wish to help beings. Always be virtuous action with your body, speech and mind. Apply mind training impartially and from the depth of your heart towards everyone and everything. Pay special attention to those closely related to you. Don't be swayed with external conditions. Practice what's most important in this time: bodhicitta and applying the antidote to delusion. Don't follow the worldly mind. Be consistent in your practice. Train wholeheartedly. Free yourself from delusion by using investigation and analysis. Don't boast about your positive action. Don't be bad-tempered. Don't be fickle, or expect gratitude or thank yous. Because of my many aspirations, I have defied the tragic state of suffering, and then we take this instruction to subdue self-grasping. Now, even if death comes, I have no regrets. So in this text, it starts by paying homage of great compassion. So this each text, and at the beginning there's a homage. So it shows a little bit what's the main point. You know, if it's homage to Manjushri, so for example, the emphasis is on wisdom, and here is on homage to great compassion. It shows that the main emphasis is compassion and bodhicitta. And then it shows where this instruction came from. So this instruction handed down for Serlingpa. So Serlingpa is the Tibetan name of Dharmarakshita, and so he was the one which composed the Wheel of Sharp Weapon. So it's another Lojong text that one studies. It helps us to transform the problems of this degenerate age into factors supporting our progress to enlightenment. And thus, in this way, they're similar to a diamond. So diamond is the most precious stone, among the stones. So these teachings are among the most precious instruction that one can receive. And they are like the sun. So the sun dispels, all darkness or all darkness. So like if one practices this teaching, all the darkness of our mind gets removed. And like a medicinal tree, so it heals whatever suffering or mental affliction that one has. So these are a little bit what these images convey. So then first do the groundwork. So here we're going to meditate a little bit on these points. I think you see, normally one should meditate on this point every day. And for doing that, one has to understand what consciousness is. You see, what mind is. You see, in the Western scientific world, often one thinks that the mind is a result of the brain. Something happen in the brain, or some synapses, some kind of electricity, and that produces mind. Whereas in the Buddhist world, it's the opposite. You see, it's the mind that creates the brain, instead of the brain creating the mind. So one has to understand this statement. What does that actually mean? So awareness is something immaterial. So its cause can also only be something immaterial, a previous moment of itself. So the mind is a stream of awareness. But in order to understand that, one has to understand that there are three levels of awareness. You see, there's the gross, ordinary awareness that we have, that is very much dependent on the brain. You see, so certain emotion or certain state of mind cannot arise if your brain is damaged. So it's like the mind uses the vehicle of the brain in order to function on the gross level. So they are very much interdependent and depend on each other. You see, if there would be no consciousness, then in the body, the body would be a corpse, right? So the body needs the mind or awareness or life force to be able to be alive. So the brain by itself, is not enough. So this is you see, on the gross level, body, mind, or awareness, consciousness depend on each other. However, there's a more subtle level of consciousness where, so the subtle level of consciousness depend on the central channel and the chakras and the wind energy that flows in our subtle body, that we have a certain type of experience of, like when we dream, So dream is a more deeper level of consciousness, which is still linked to the body. But then you have a very subtle level of consciousness, and a subtle wind energy that we experience when we die, the clear light of death, right? And that then becomes the most subtle level of consciousness, right? And that is what travels from lifetime to lifetime. So it's not our gross mind, our ordinary mind with our thought, emotion and so forth that travels to next life, right? So we with our name, with our personality, with our states of mind, that doesn't go on. What goes on is something much more subtle. You see, at the level of the most subtle mind of clear light, there's no thoughts, there's no emotion, right? These are gross manifestation of mind. They don't function. For example, in the death process, you have the 80 indicative conception of states of mind that disappear, right? So all what you normally experience as mind, thought, emotion, all this disappears, right? So you experience a state of consciousness that is much more refined. It's almost like, when you go trekking in the mountains, so the higher you go, the more rarefied the oxygen is, right? There's less, so your mind becomes, you get a little bit dizzy, or giggly, because the air is, is refined, so it affects. So the same thing when your consciousness becomes more subtle. So all the gross, heavy thought, emotion, all these disappear. Your consciousness becomes more refined, and it doesn't have subject and object duality like we have now. And so the mind is much more intelligent and can see much farther. It's just a different level of consciousness. So one trains as a yogini, one trains to try to experience that. So that one, the practice of highest yoga tantra is to make us able to experience that before we die, so that we can actually use it in our meditation. Because the most subtle mind of clear light, you see, there are states of mind that are more intelligent, and because you don't have your heavy thought, your heavy emotion, your heavy state of mind, that mind is naturally in a state of concentration. You see, the distraction, the disturbance arise at the level of a gross mind. The more subtle your consciousness is, the easier it is to get experience and to understand reality. So that's why they say, you see, using the ordinary mind in meditation to reach enlightenment takes a long time. They speak about 3 countless great eons. And if you are able to experience the more subtle mind of clear light, this huge amount of time, you can bring it down to 3 years. For those which can experience this more subtle mind of clear, then the path goes very quickly. So that's why one trains to experience that. And even if one cannot do that in this life, we all experience it when we die. So if you are trained in this text, you see, if you make your main practice love and compassion and understanding of reality, each time you die, you have a chance to reach enlightenment. Because there you experience this more subtle mind of clear light. And if you train, if you know how to get there and how to use it, you can actually experience enlightenment when you die. So that's why one trains, in certain practice like that. So there's here in this point, in point 4, how to use the how to die. So there it explains, you see, how to actually use our experience of death like that. So you see, when we die, what happens is our consciousness withdraws from the body, first into the subtle body, which is the central channel, and then from the central channel it absorbs into our heart chakra, a small drop at the heart. No? So there we experience the most subtle mind of clear light, and then after a certain number of days, then that most subtle mind leaves the body, and there we are in what's called the bardo, or the intermediate state between two lives, right? And then depending on the imprint, the habit that are stored in this most subtle mind of clear light, then that makes our consciousness go here and there. So in the universe there are many, many places, where one can go. So even, can the material universe, you can imagine the number of planets possible, right? And then there are gross matter, subtle matter, very subtle matter. So there's many, and then there's places where there's no need of matter for the consciousness to be born. So there's infinite possibilities, right, for consciousness to go when one dies. And what bring this consciousness here and there is simply the imprint on the consciousness, the habits, the qualities developed and so forth, what we call karma and mental states. So I would like to do one meditation before taking a break, is to meditate on that process of dying, because I think it's a very important meditation. So His Holiness Dalai Lama says he does this meditation 8 times every day, right? So in different practices he does that, every day. So it's very important to familiarize yourself with these states, so that when death actually comes, you recognize them. No? So for example, we have the same experience when we faint, but it goes so fast that we are not able to identify if one is not trained, And in sexual orgasm, climax, also there's something similar, that happens. But again, it goes so fast that we cannot really identify all the steps. Also, how to say, as the process of death unfolds, the mind becomes happier and happier, because the gross state of mind, gross thought cannot function anymore, and then in the process, death, fear disappear, longing disappear, and the mind becomes more and more blissful and more spacious. So actually the experience of death itself, the clear light of death, is the most blissful and the happiest experience that one can have as a living beings, right? So if someone dies in our entourage, it's good to let them be, as long as possible in that state of clear light, because it's the happiest thing a living being can experience. So, and then when the signs of death occur, that the consciousness has left the body, then one can move the body and do things to it. But if one can leave the person at peace while he or she experiences this clear light of death, that's excellent, because that's where a person can get deep realization and completely change what's happening to him when he or she leaves the body. So you have to understand, it's a process where the consciousness withdraws from the body gradually. You see, the consciousness first enters into the central channel, and then into the heart chakra, and then leaves the body through the heart chakra. So that's the process. So what's happening actually physiologically. So one can produce it in meditation, right? So an advanced practitioner can do that, like His Holiness Dalai Lama. He can produce that, because how to say, he has cleaned the subtle body, the wind energy that flows, you know, in the channel. So it's a little bit like a nervous system. You see, we have channels that pervades our whole body, and then the wind, the consciousness within the body, the consciousness are you know, pervades this nervous system throughout the body, right? So a yogi can withdraw this energy inside. You say he can suck the consciousness into the central channel and then suck it into the heart chakra, simply by the power of will, by the power of his meditation, you know. So he can do that. So for us, all these channel, wind and drop, they are kind of, some are crooked, some are dirty, and so it's actually, the energy doesn't flow that easily, you know. So in the practice of purification, you know, so one tries to clean all this subtle body energy, so that the energy, you can withdraw it and go back in the body, go out of the body, like that. So that's part of the of highest yoga tantra training, right? So that you can actually move this wind, move your mind as you will, you know. So at our stage, you see, what we do, we just imagine it, you know, we fake it, we pretend, you know. But for advanced practitioner, they can actually do it, you know, and quite easily, you know. It's just a matter of training, of familiarizing the mind. So the first, what we do with the consciousness, the first things we do is to separate it from what's called the earth element, you know, the cohesiveness of the body. You know? So we withdraw the consciousness from that, and usually as a sign, you know, your eye consciousness is linked to that, so your eye consciousness becomes weaker, you know. And then your space of awareness, the space of mind, becomes a little bit shimmering, like a mirage. You know, normally your mind is like a space that is stable, you know, in which you have your thought, emotion, and mental image arising. So that space becomes like shimmering, you know, moving a little bit, you know. So it's the same space of awareness you have in everyday life. It just becomes a little bit shimmering because the consciousness withdraws from the earth element. And then when the consciousness withdraws from the water element, so then you don't hear much anymore, you know. The sounds in the room appear very far. You still hear, but you feel like this, you know, the person in the room, the sounds are from next room, so they appear further away. So the consciousness withdraws towards the center of your body. So you kind of imagine you have a vacuum cleaner in your heart, and it sucks your consciousness, you know, towards the center of your body. And then your consciousness is filled like with white smoke, you know. Like, for example, sometimes you cook in the kitchen something and it burns, you know, and you're in the next room, you know, being on the phone, you know. And then you come back in the kitchen, you know, it's full of smoke, you know. So like that, your consciousness has this white, smokish appearance. So normally, if one dies, so the liquid of the body starts drying up at this stage. See the liquid in the eyes, in the mouth. And then the next stage, one withdraws the consciousness from the fire element or the heat. So at this stage, the heat of the body starts decreasing, towards the heart. So one feels like having cold feet or cold hand or cold head, And at this stage one doesn't smell much anymore or taste. And the smell and taste senses start becoming weaker. And our space of consciousness appears to be filled with fireflies, like dots of light jumping around. And then the earth element, the consciousness withdraws from the air element, So at this point, the breathing becomes very shallow. If one dies, then the breathing stops. So a yogi can also, at this stage, stop his breathing, or breathe very, very little. And then the the body sense consciousness dissolves, so one doesn't feel the body anymore. And then the consciousness becomes pervaded by a dim light, like the glow of a candle flame on a white wall. So it's a stable light, a dim, white, yellowish light. And then the consciousness in the subtle body withdraws from the crown of our head towards the heart in the subtle body. So one's consciousness becomes quite vast, you see. So one's consciousness doesn't feel like being in the body anymore. So one's consciousness becomes pervaded with white light. And it doesn't seem to have a center and a periphery. You see, the consciousness becomes space, but there's no duality subject and object in that consciousness. So an image given is the sky just before the sunrise, the white space of the sky before the sunrise. So that's what our consciousness is like. And then our thought, emotion start gradually ceasing to function, starting with the grosser one. So our consciousness becomes too subtle to have normal thought, normal emotion. So our love, compassion, anger, jealousy, attachment, desire, anger, fear, longing, all these things disappear. So our consciousness becomes very light, very pure. And then the red drop of the lower chakra comes rising towards the heart. And then one space of consciousness becomes pervaded by a red-orange light, like a certain kind of sky when the sun sets. You know, this orange-reddish space. And this space is more is vaster than before and more blissful than before. So with whatever level of consciousness you experience, there's always a sensation, and there's always discernment. So there's always understanding. So there's always intelligence in the mind. So space of awareness is not blank. You know, it always has a sensation, and it always has discernment. These are ever-present mental factors. So imagine your awareness being a space like sky, pervaded with orange light, with a pleasurable sensation, and very vast. And then physiologically you imagine that your consciousness absorbs in a drop at your heart. And there your consciousness becomes even more spacious, but like the sky at night, you know, when it's cloudy and you don't see any stars or any sun and moon. So you have this feeling of spaciousness, but there's no light. And there's a very pleasurable sensation. And your intelligence, your awareness is fully there. So all memory of this life have disappeared. All memory of your relatives, the activities you have done, everything completely disappears. And then the second part of this black space becomes unconscious. And it's like your consciousness enters into the eye of a needle, you know, in your heart. So there's a door in your heart, like you enter into another dimension, you know. So your consciousness enters into a very tiny place in your heart chakra, and there you experience clear light. You see, so all your consciousness is sucked into that subtle spot, you know, and within there is the dimension of clear light, which is the most subtle level of consciousness one can experience. So imagine that you bring all your consciousness into a tiny eye of a needle in your heart, like a door into another dimension. And that other dimension is a space of blissful clear light. So very bright, very blissful, and your consciousness is limitless. Like you're in a very bright room, you know, a room with white walls and very brightly illuminated. And you imagine that the walls of the room disappear and you're just that space of bright light with no limit, and you're not looking from the perspective of a center like we do now, because of our sense consciousness. We have a center, because of being in the body. But there you don't have a body, so there's no center in your awareness. Your awareness is everywhere. Blissful, bright, and heightened awareness, intelligence, to understand who you really are. You see, there's no more body there. There's no more name of you. Yet you exist as a limitless space of blissful awareness. And then all the spiritual instruction that you have ever received, they come back to your mind. So you can use them to understand reality, who you really are. So this space of blissful awareness with your intelligence, you can transform it into the omniscient mind of a Buddha at that very moment. You see, there's no limited self, limited ego. You can transcend the ego there. And for a person that is able to do that, that consciousness becomes a consciousness that pervades all that exists. So this most subtle mind of clear light can pervade all phenomena. So you understand all that exists at that moment. For an ordinary person, which is not able to get this realization at that moment, after a number of days, that blissful awareness subsides, and due to some movement within that consciousness, due to the imprints, the habits, the karmic energy, so some movement happens in that space of blissful awareness, and the consciousness becomes again more gross. So from this blissful spacious white light, you go back to the black space of awareness, right? So consciousness is almost like you went to the peak of a mountain, and then it's time to go back down, so you go back to more level of oxygen, so the consciousness becomes more gross, very subtly, so you end up in the black space of awareness. And then into the red space of awareness. Again, a little bit more gross. And then certain thought, emotions start functioning again. and then the white space of awareness. Again, more thought, emotion can function. Hope, fear start functioning again. And then the white space of awareness. Again, more gross, less spacious, with more thought and emotion. And then the four subtle elements of the intermediate state body arise. So you have the air element, and the fire element, and water element, and earth element materialize again, and you end up in the body of the intermediate state. So they say it's about the size of a forearm, and is a white, depending on which type of rebirth you're going to take. So if you're born as a human, you have this intermediate state body of a human, which is forearm length, and can see other beings from the same, that will be born in the same dimension. So if it's in a human dimension, you can see other beings in the intermediate state, which will also be born as human. And at that time you can see the ordinary world again. So you can go to visit your relative, you can go visit the place where you lived, the things that you liked. So you can see the ordinary world again. There's just one problem, is that the people, they cannot see you. You see, unless they have high level of clairvoyance, they cannot see you. So you go to see your ex-partner, your children, your friends. So you can see them, you want to say, you want to communicate, but they cannot see you. So it's frustrating. So after a while you lose interest, because there's nothing you can do, you cannot communicate. You realize that there's no way for you to communicate, and then your interest turns more towards other things, to explore that dimension. So that intermediate state body can go through matter. So you can go through the planet, through mountain, and whichever place you think of, you're instantly there. At the speed of thought, you think of a place, and that mental image of that place brings you to that place. So you can cross towards everything except the mother's womb. You see? So you can go wherever you want. And then you eat, your food is a smell, So you get sustained through smells. So it says you stay in this intermediate state up to 7 days. So 7 times 24 hours. Without sleeping. You don't need sleep. So you explore that dimension. And your mind is again pervaded by your natural or ordinary emotion, your interest, your habit. So all this is that was stored in your consciousness becomes manifest again. So if your mind has a lot of guilt or resentment or fear, so all these manifest in the space of your awareness, And if you have a lot of love and compassion and devotion and peaceful subdued mind, so this manifests into a peaceful environment, peaceful people you meet, and so forth. So your intermediate state is very much affected by who you were, what you did, and your character, your personality. So there's it's almost a little bit like in a dream. You see, your mind can manifest hellish state, fearful experience, and also very pleasant, very beautiful. So depends. So we can, if one is not attached to any body, to any form, one can be born as infinite consciousness, not taking form again. Or if one's mind is pure and is attached to pure form, one can be born in the level of light energy body, like certain level of Deva realms. So everything is created by mind, but everything is made out of light energy bodies. Oneself, one's environment, other people, everybody has light energy body that sustain on concentration. So the food is concentration. One doesn't need gross food. One doesn't need shelter, because everything is made out of blissful mind energy. One doesn't need to work. So one creates this kind of mental paradise with our mind, and oneself and other beings are born in that space and lives in that space. So then there are musicians that create a world made out of music. The music takes form. So these are called the Gandharvas, the celestial musician. So the mind can create whatever it wants, and that can take shape. So architects, can create cities with their mind. So depending on one's level of mind consciousness, so anything is possible. So some people decide not to have any form. They think form is something gross. So they're born in this level of formlessness, infinite space, infinite consciousness, and so forth. And other beings are born in level of subtle form energy. And those which have more gross emotion, more gross karma, they're born in one of the 6 realms. Right? So for those like us that might be reborn as human, so we are attracted to our future parent because we want to enjoy sense pleasure, this gross sense pleasure. We are attached to it. We are attached to certain people. We are attached to certain places, and because of that we come back, in this dimension. And then we are gradually attracted to our future parents due to some karmic connection. And then we are attracted to specifically one of the partner that will become our mother or our father. And then we either see them or imagine them having sexual relationship, and then that makes our consciousness enter into the mother's womb, where the sperm and ovum of the parent meet, and then the consciousness enters there. And then as the embryo develops, one's consciousness becomes gradually more and more trapped into that embryo as it develops. And as the sense consciousness of the baby in the mother's womb become complete, then one is completely trapped into this new body, you know. And then at the time of birth, we come out into this new world, you know. And then gradually the memory of the intermediate state of our previous lives disappear. You know, that becomes our complete new reality, and we lose memory of what happened before. The only thing left is certain habit, certain interest, certain characteristic we have. And then we have to learn this new world, this new language, this new way of communicating. And we learn from our parents and brother, sister, and then at school we learn a job. And then we have aspiration for this new life, and we live it. And then either we die because of an accident or a sickness or old age. And then again our consciousness withdraws from that life. Again we go to this 8th level of consciousness as the consciousness withdraws from this body. And we end up again in the clear light of death. And then again the consciousness becomes grosser in the intermediate state. And again looks for a next life. Again born from some parent or in the form and formless realm. Again that lasts a certain number of years due to karma, then again end and we end up again in the clear light. Again in the intermediate state, and again another rebirth. And all these happen due to the imprint left on our mind. Our good deeds, our bad deeds produce happiness or problems. And the level of mental affliction adds a layer of, whether we are happy in a life or not. Depends on our karma and our mental afflictions, our states of mind. And this goes on forever. There's no end to this process of taking rebirth. You see, we born, then we die, we go to this 8th vision of the death process, clear light. Stay there for a certain number of days, and then again intermediate state, subtle level of consciousness, and due to a habit, imprint, longing, interest, we take our next life. So the energy, what's there is always consciousness, awareness, this stream of mind, of awareness. And what affects it is the karma, so the imprints of our act that manifests as happiness and suffering. And where we go depends on our interest our habit, our attachments, our desire, or our aversion. So this has no beginning and no end. And the frustration of it is that we are not under complete control. You see? And because of that, it's unsatisfactory. You see, one life you're with this person, another life with another person. You have children, you have to leave them behind, you have partner, you have parents. So each life is completely new. So we had beginningless life, what can we show for it? Each time we have to start all over again. So that's the frustration of cyclic existence. So in that sense is no satisfaction, and something can happen any time. No karma can ripen and then suffering arise. Or good karma ripen and some happiness is experienced, but it never lasts. Because the cause is impermanent, the imprint is impermanent, the result is impermanent. So that's what we call cyclic existence of samsara. No? And the energy that produces is the happiness and suffering that is experienced within it, is our virtuous and non-virtuous deeds. And those are produced by our emotion. If our deeds are motivated by love, compassion, patience, non-attachment, then it produces happiness. If our energy is motivated by attachment, pride, jealousy, anger, hatred, so whatever deeds we do under those energy, leave a negative imprint on the mind that produces suffering as a result. And the root cause of all that is our mistaken perception of reality. We don't understand who we really are. We don't understand how the world really exists. And because of this reification of reality, all this samsara can function. If we realize who we really are, if we realize how the world really exists, all this collapse. And we understand in another dimension, the dimension of enlightenment, where there's no self, there's no other, and one's consciousness is everything. And one can manifest anything one wants. There's no more limit. And there's no more being under the control of karma. No more under the control of mental affliction. Fear, longing never arise again. And this blissful awareness lasts forever. And one perceives the whole world and all sentient beings, and out of spontaneous compassion one manifests and help beings in whatever way we can. So we have the choice, you see, to continue our life the way we do, being trapped into our perception of reality and under the control of karma and mental affliction, and continue this ordinary life in cyclic existence. Or we can decide, you see, realize how unsatisfactory it is, how always under control of hope and fear, no control of what's going to happen tomorrow, and that even ordinary pleasure, you see, they have this level of unsatisfaction. We never have enough, it's never complete, it could always be better. And this body has so much limitation, it can get sick, and we have to feed it, we have to put it into a house to protect it. And then in order to enjoy all these things, we have to work and get money, and so all this is such a big hassle if you think about it. And there is another dimension of consciousness one can experience. So that's when one realizes how cyclic existence is. Deeply, really meditate to understand how it works. Then reach a point where you have this determination to become free. You see there's a path out of that conditioning. Your consciousness can become free. So when you understand that deeply, not just intellectually, you can see it, then you have this effortless aspiration to become free. So renunciation is not something painful, I have to give up something I like. You actually give up something that is only pain, and you go towards something that is only light and blissful. But yet we have so many addiction, addiction to food, to drink, nowadays to smartphone and internet, and places and people. You see, we're so, our consciousness is so trapped, in all these things. So they are there to make us happy, but there's a deep insatisfaction in our relation with these things. It's not just bliss, it's not just pleasure to have a smartphone or to be on internet. There's an addictive nature and there's an insatisfaction. We don't realize it, compared to a consciousness that is free. And then we're trapped in this body with all its limitation and growing old. And then because of this addiction, you see, when the consciousness becomes free, it has the memory of this addiction and wants to experience that again. And we come back. Nobody pushes us back into a gross body. It is we come willingly because of our addiction to it. So that's why we never become free. Is nobody makes us do like that. It's we ourselves. So there's something deep to understand in this process, you see, of how consciousness can become free and how we are trapped. So liberation and enlightenment is not far away. It's simply we don't want it enough. All right, tea break.